The last time I tried to say my son's name out loud, my mouth moved, but no sound came out. That's the thing nobody tells you about silence. It doesn't always start outside. Sometimes it starts inside your own body. I was standing in the kitchen when it happened. Same kitchen I've stood in for almost 30 years. Same cracked tile. Same window that never shuts all the way. Same cheap clock ticking like it's got somewhere important to be, even when I don't. I opened my mouth to call him. Just his name. The one I whispered the first night he was born. The one I said 1,000 times when I packed his lunches, tied his shoes, kissed his forehead before school. Nothing came out. I thought maybe my throat was dry. I grabbed the chipped mug, took a sip of cold coffee, tried again. Still nothing. My heart started racing before my brain caught up. That's how fear works. It don't ask permission. It just moves in. I grabbed the phone from the counter. That old landline. The one with the long cord that twists itself like it's tired of waiting too. I dialed his number from memory. I don't need it written down. A mother don't forget numbers like that. It rang once, twice. Then a voice I didn't recognize, clean, calm, empty. The number you are trying to reach has been restricted by the administrator. Administrator. That word sat in my chest like a brick. I stood there, holding the phone, listening to the dial tone like maybe it would change its mind. Like maybe it would apologize and say, "Just kidding, here he is." I didn't hang up right away. Mothers wait, even when it hurts. I tried again, same message. Again. By the third time, my legs gave out and I had to sit down at the table. The same table where I used to help him with homework after cleaning other people's houses all day. The same table where I rubbed my eyes and told myself, just a little more, then we'll rest. I looked around my apartment. It was quiet. Too quiet. No TV, no radio. Just that clock ticking like it was counting something I couldn't see. I wasn't calling to ask for money. Lord knows I never did that. I wasn't calling to complain or guilt trip him or pull him back into my small life. I was calling because it was Sunday. And on Sundays, I hear my son's voice, or at least, I used to. People think when your kid grows up and makes it big, you stop worrying. They think pride replaces fear, like success is some magic eraser. It's not. It just gives fear a nicer outfit. I reached into the drawer and pulled out his graduation photo. Him in that cap and gown, smiling like the world finally made room for him. I pressed my thumb against the glass, right over his face. "You did it, baby," I whispered. Or at least I tried to. Nothing came out. That's when I noticed my right hand shaking. Just a little at first, then more. Like it didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't panic. Not yet. I cleaned up, washed the mug, straightened the chair. Because that's what women like me do. We keep things tidy, even when our insides are falling apart. I told myself he was busy. Hospitals don't sleep. Brains don't wait. Lives don't pause for phone calls. Still, something felt wrong. Not missed call wrong. Erased wrong. Because when a mother's voice gets blocked, it's never an accident. And sitting there, in that quiet kitchen, with my mouth refusing to work and a robot telling me I was restricted, I realized something that scared me more than my shaking hands. If I couldn't speak, if I couldn't reach him, then somebody else had been speaking for me. And whatever they were telling my son, it sure as hell wasn't the truth. But before my body finally betrayed me completely, before the doctors, before the hospital, before the silence became permanent, you need to know what I gave up to make my son the man the world applauds today. Because sacrifices like mine don't disappear quietly. People say I'm strong. They say it like it's a compliment. Like strength is something you wake up and choose, same way you choose shoes. Truth is, I didn't choose strength. I chose survival. And survival don't come with applause. When my son was little, mornings started before the sun even thought about showing up. I'd wake up at 4, sometimes earlier, when the city was still half asleep and the streets smelled like yesterday's rain and garbage day. I'd move quiet so I wouldn't wake him, boil water for instant coffee, and pull on clothes that already smelled like bleach from the day before. I cleaned houses back then, big ones. The kind with stairs you don't need and kitchens bigger than my whole apartment. I scrubbed floors so shiny you could see your reflection, even when mine looked tired and worn. I washed dishes that cost more than my monthly rent. I folded clothes soft as clouds and wondered what it felt like to live without counting dollars in your head. Every dollar I made had a destination. Not vacations, not treats, not dreams of my own. Him. I packed his lunches the night before so I wouldn't have to rush in the morning. Peanut butter sandwiches cut just right, apple slices wrapped tight so they wouldn't turn brown. Sometimes I'd slip a note inside, nothing fancy, just love you or do your best. I didn't know then how much words matter, how one day I'd be begging my own mouth to work again. He was curious, always asking questions. About the body, about the brain, about why people forget things and how memory works. I didn't have answers, but I had encouragement. Go find out, I'd tell him. That's what books are for. Books were free at the library. Shoes weren't. So when winter came and his boots had holes, I wore my coat inside and gave him the good one. When the electricity got cut off, we lit candles and I told him it was study time. When my back screamed from carrying buckets of water and bags of supplies, I smiled anyway. Because that's what mothers do, we turn pain into quiet. The night he told me he wanted to be a doctor, I didn't laugh. I didn't say it was impossible. I didn't tell him we were poor. I just nodded and said, okay. Then I went to the bathroom and cried into a towel so he wouldn't hear me. Not because I doubted him, because I knew the road was going to be brutal. I worked more after that, took extra houses, extra shifts. Sometimes I'd come home so tired my hands wouldn't stop shaking. But I still sat at the table with him, quizzed him on science terms I couldn't pronounce, listened to him explain the brain like it was a universe. When the acceptance letter came, I held it like it was glass. Scholarship, full ride, out of state, big name school. Everybody told me I must be proud. I was, but pride comes with fear they don't warn you about. I sold what little I had to get him ready. Old jewelry, a TV, a chair that had been with me since he was born. I smiled through it all, told him it was junk anyway. The night before he left, I sat on his bed and watched him sleep. Just watched. Memorized his breathing, his face, the sound of him alive in the room. I didn't know then that one day I'd give anything to hear him say my name again. Because sacrifices don't end when your child succeeds. Sometimes, that's when they really begin. And if you think all that sacrifice bought me a permanent place in my son's life, wait till you hear how easy it was for someone else to convince him I was nothing but noise. The first time my son didn't answer my call, I told myself it was nothing. Doctors miss calls. Hospitals are loud. Lives are messy. That's what I told my heart, while it paced around my chest like it didn't believe me. I didn't leave a voicemail. I never liked those. Talking into empty space always felt wrong. Instead, I waited, made dinner, folded laundry, sat by the window and watched the street lights flicker on like they always do. He called back the next day. "Hey, Mom," he said, breathless, like he'd been running. "Sorry, yesterday was crazy." And just like that, my chest loosened. I didn't tell him I'd stared at the phone all night. I didn't tell him I slept with it next to my pillow like it was a living thing. I just said, "It's okay, baby. I know you're busy." That sentence became my favorite lie. Weeks passed, then months. Calls got shorter. Voices got rushed. I started hearing beeping sounds in the background machines, elevators, other people's lives moving faster than mine. Sometimes a woman's voice would pop in the background. Polite, controlled, professional, She'd say things like, "We're running late," or "He has a meeting." At first, I was grateful. Someone was taking care of him. I didn't know care could turn into control. One Sunday, I called, like always. Same time, 3 o'clock. I could set my watch by it. The phone rang once, twice, then stopped. No voicemail. That was new. I waited 10 minutes and tried again. Same thing. The third time, someone picked up, but it wasn't him. "Hello," the voice said. Smooth, confident. The kind of voice that never doubts itself. "This is his office. May I ask who's calling?" "Office," I swallowed. "This is his mother." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Oh," the voice said. "He's unavailable right now. Extremely busy. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, but I nodded anyway, even though they couldn't see me. "Can you tell him I called?" I asked. "Of course," the voice said. "We'll let him know." They never did. I didn't complain, didn't confront, didn't push. I adjusted. That's another thing mothers are good at. We shrink ourselves to fit the space we're allowed. I stopped calling twice if he didn't answer. Then I stopped leaving messages. Then I stopped asking questions that might take too long to answer. I learned how to be quick, efficient, easy to ignore. "How are you?" became "just checking in." "I miss you" became "I know you're busy." "Call me when you can" became "no rush." One day, months later, he finally called me back after I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Mom," he said, tired, "you don't have to call so much." So much. Once a week. On Sundays. My throat closed up, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," he said, but he sounded annoyed anyway. "It's just, things are different now." Different. That word did more damage than he probably knew. Different meant I didn't fit anymore. Different meant the woman who carried him, fed him, worked herself into the ground for him, now had to learn new rules. Rules nobody explained. After that, I waited for him to call me. I told myself it was respectful, mature, understanding. Weeks passed. Then months. My phone stayed quiet. I still set it next to my bed every night. Old habits die hard. I'd wake up at every little sound, thinking it was him. It never was. And then one Sunday, when I finally gathered the courage to dial again, when my fingers shook like they knew something my mind didn't want to accept, I heard that voice. That robot voice. "The number you are trying to reach has been restricted by the administrator." That's when I understood. This wasn't distance. This was design. Someone had decided my voice was a problem, and my son had agreed. But what he didn't know, what nobody told him, was that while they were blocking my calls, my body was already preparing its own way of silencing me forever. The morning my body betrayed me, it didn't feel dramatic. No warning music. No movie-style collapse. Just a spoon slipping out of my hand like it got tired before I did. I was standing at the stove, stirring oatmeal plain, like always when my right arm went heavy. Not numb exactly, just slow, like it was moving through syrup. The spoon hit the floor with a soft clink, and I remember thinking, well, that's new. I bent down to pick it up and the room tilted. Not spinning tilting, like the world had decided to lean away from me. "Okay," I said out loud, or at least I thought I did. Nothing came out. That's when fear finally showed its face. I tried again, louder this time. "Okay?" Still nothing. My mouth was moving. I could feel it, but the sound stayed trapped somewhere deep, like it missed the exit. I reached for the counter and missed. My knees hit the floor harder than I expected, and that's when my heart started pounding like it was trying to break free and run for help. I knew what it was before the ambulance came. I'd cleaned enough houses for enough old folks to recognize the signs. Stroke. Funny how life works. I spent decades breaking my body so my son could heal others. And when my turn came, there was nobody there to hear me fall. I crawled. Slow. Ugly. Dignity left the room real quick. I reached the phone and knocked it off the table by accident. It landed face down, just out of reach. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes laughing is the only way not to scream. When the neighbor finally found me hours later, when she came to check why I hadn't picked up my mail, I was half-conscious, drooling, my words tangled up inside my head like wires crossed wrong. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old fear. They talked over me, around me, about me. She's aphasic. Damage on the left side. She understands more than she can express. I wanted to tell them I understood everything. I wanted to tell them my son is a doctor. I wanted to tell them to call him. But my mouth had other plans. They asked for an emergency contact. I tried to say his name. What came out sounded like air leaking from a tire. The nurse leaned in. "Ma'am, can you write?" I nodded. Thank God my left hand still worked. I wrote his name slow. Careful. Like it might disappear if I rushed. They dialed. It rang. Then that pause. Then a different voice. Polity. Efficient. "This is his office. He's unavailable," the nurse explained. "Stroke. Mother. Emergency." The voice said, "I'll pass along the message." I watched her hang up. Something inside me cracked that day, and it wasn't my brain. Days passed. Then more. White walls. Machines beeping. Speech therapists smiling too hard. "We'll get there," they said. "Just keep trying." I did try. I practiced sounds, letters, shapes with my mouth. Ba, ah. Words I once used to tell bedtime stories were now locked behind a door I couldn't open. Still, I waited. Because surely someone would tell my son. He never came. Not that day. Not the next. Not the day after. When I was discharged, they handed me papers and pity. A pamphlet on recovery. A list of exercises. A follow-up appointment. No family member signature. I went home alone. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the same cracked tile, the same clock ticking like it didn't care. I picked up the phone with my good hand and dialed his number again. That robot voice answered. Restricted. I stared at the receiver, and something cold settled in my chest. I had lost my voice. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing my silence had been approved. And if you think the story ends with a stroke and a blocked phone number, wait till you hear what my son signed without reading and what it cost both of us. They say paperwork is harmless. Just forms. Just signatures. Just standard procedure. But I learned the hard way paper can hurt people without ever touching them. I found out by accident. A thin envelope showed up in my mailbox one afternoon, mixed in with grocery store flyers and a past due notice I was already ignoring. My name was printed clean and sharp, like whoever typed it didn't know me at all. Inside were words I couldn't say out loud even if my mouth worked. Notice of property review. Change in authorized representative. I read it slow. Then again. Then again. My apartment. My lease. My name. And under authorized decision maker. Not me. My son's name was there. Or at least, it used to be. Under that typed neat and final was another name I didn't recognize. A woman's name, followed by a title that made my stomach drop. Legal proxy. I felt heat rush up my neck, my good hand shaking so hard the paper rattled. I sat down because I didn't trust my legs anymore. Proxy means permission. Permission means someone can decide for you. Decide where you live. Decide what you keep. Decide what you lose. I took the letter to the clinic the next day. The social worker read it, frowned, then looked at me with that careful face people use when they're about to say something you won't like. "Do you have family?" she asked. I nodded. "Anyone listed legally?" she asked. I shook my head, then stopped, then nodded again. I didn't know anymore. She explained it slow, like I was a child. Sometime after my stroke, while I was still learning how to swallow without choking, while I was practicing sounds like a baby, authority had been transferred. Not stolen. Transferred. Signed. Approved. By my son. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to ask her how a man who saves lives for a living could sign away his own mother's voice like it was nothing. But all that came out was a wet sound and tears I couldn't wipe fast enough. The social worker said something about efficiency, about helping families manage responsibilities, about how doctors are busy, and sometimes they delegate, like I was a task. I went home that night and sat in the dark, didn't turn on the TV, didn't eat, just sat there, staring at the wall like maybe it would explain itself. I kept thinking about my son's hands, those hands I used to hold when we crossed busy streets, those hands I warmed in mine when winters were cruel, those hands I watched shake the first time he dissected a frog. Those hands signed something, and didn't even call to tell me. Weeks later, another letter came. This one was shorter. Notice of termination. Relocation assistance available. Relocation. That's what they call it when they move you out of your own life. I tried to call my son from the clinic phone, blocked. I tried again from a neighbor's cell, straight to voicemail full. I wrote him a letter. Slow. Painful. Each word took effort. Baby, something is wrong. Please call me. I mailed it. It came back unopened. No forwarding address. No explanation. Just silence, stamped, and returned. That's when it hit me. This wasn't neglect anymore. This was removal. Someone had decided my presence complicated his life. And my son, whether he knew it or not, had allowed it. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, listening to pipes knock and neighbors argue, and I realized something that chilled me deeper than any diagnosis. Losing your voice is one thing, but losing your place in your child's life, that's a different kind of stroke. One you don't recover from easily. And the worst part? My son still thought he was a good man because he hadn't yet seen where his decisions were about to leave me. They didn't move me out all at once. That would have been too honest. Instead, they called it a transition. A woman showed up one morning with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She spoke slow, like kindness was a setting you could turn on and off. "Just temporary," she said. "Until everything's sorted." Temporary has a way of turning permanent when you don't have a voice. They packed my things into boxes that all looked the same. No labels, no care. Just tape pulled tight, sealing up years like they were clutter. My son's childhood drawings, the mug he broke and glued back together when he was 8, the blanket I wrapped him in when he had fevers, gone into cardboard. I tried to point, tried to protest, tried to ask where. My mouth gave me air and nothing else. They took me to a place on the edge of town. Beige building. Clean. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest. Assisted living, they said. Assisted. I needed a voice, not assistance. The first night, I didn't sleep. I listened to strangers breathe through thin walls. Heard someone cry down the hall. Heard someone call out a name that never answered. I wondered if my son slept well that night, if he was dreaming about surgeries and success and awards on his wall, or if he ever dreamed about me. Days blurred. Pills, exercises, group meals that tasted like nothing. People calling me sweetie and honey because they couldn't pronounce my name or didn't bother trying. I kept waiting for him. I imagined the moment like a movie scene, the door swinging open, his face breaking when he saw me, his hands grabbing mine. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I practiced forgiving him in my head. Forgiveness is a habit for women like me. But the door never opened. Instead, a letter arrived. Not from him, from a law office. Short, clean, final. All decisions regarding your care will be handled by your appointed proxy. Appointed, like I volunteered. That night, I sat on my narrow bed and finally understood the truth I'd been avoiding. My son didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt me. He just kept choosing the easier voice to listen to. The one that said, "This is efficient. This is professional. This is best for everyone." And every time he chose that voice, mine faded a little more. I thought about all the times I chose him. When I stayed quiet so he could study. When I smiled so he wouldn't worry. When I stepped back so he could step forward. I taught him how to leave me behind. That realization hurt worse than the stroke. One afternoon, a nurse handed me a tablet. "Video call," she said. "Your family scheduled it." My heart jumped. The screen lit up. There he was. Older, sharper, tired. My son. I reached for the screen, my fingers trembling. He smiled, polite, careful, like I was a patient, not his mother. "Hey, Mom," he said. "You look okay." I tried to speak. Nothing. He talked. About work, about schedules, about how everything was handled. Handled. I nodded. Because that's what I'd been trained to do. Before the call ended, he said, "I'm glad you're taken care of." The screen went black. I stared at my reflection. Taken care of. I wasn't cared for. I was managed. And the worst part? He believed he was doing the right thing. But what my son didn't know, what no one told him, was that one decision he made in comfort was about to put me somewhere even comfort couldn't protect me from. The place they moved me to after that didn't have a name anyone used out loud. On the paperwork, it was called a long-term care extension facility. Among the staff, it was the annex. Among the residents, it was just here. Here is where people end up when nobody's in a rush to come get them. The building sat behind the main facility, like an afterthought. Fewer windows, dimmer lights. The air smelled like medicine and something old you couldn't quite place. They said it was temporary again. They always say that. I stopped believing words around the same time I lost my voice. My room was smaller. One bed, one chair, a TV bolted to the wall like it might escape. They put my name on the door in black letters. Spelled wrong. I pointed at it. The nurse smiled. "We'll fix it later." Later never comes to places like that. Days passed. Then weeks. I learned the rhythm of the place by sound. The cartwheels squeaking at dawn. The cough down the hall that never stopped. The night nurse who hummed gospel songs under her breath when she thought nobody was listening. Sometimes I hummed with her. It was the only way I could feel like myself. I watched people disappear. One bed empty in the morning. Another name removed from a door. No announcements. No ceremonies. Just silence, where a person used to be. I wondered if my son knew where I was now. If he pictured me somewhere bright, clean, safe. If he'd ever imagined this place. One afternoon, a new aide came in to help me eat. Young girl. Couldn't have been more than 20. She talked fast, like silence made her nervous. "My mom used to call her mama every day," she said while cutting my food too small. "Even when she was busy." I smiled at her. Or tried to. She noticed my eyes filling and got quiet real quick. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I talk too much." I wanted to tell her it was okay. That hearing about mothers was the closest thing I had to being one anymore. But my mouth stayed locked. That night, I dreamed I was back in my old kitchen. My son was sitting at the table, younger again, tapping a pencil like he used to when he was thinking. He looked up and said, "Mom, I hear you." I woke up crying into my pillow, soundless. A week later, a man in a suit showed up. Clipboard. No smile. Just a routine review, he said, like he was checking a car. He asked questions. I answered with nods and shakes and written words that came slow. He barely looked at me. Mostly, he looked at his papers. At the end, he said something that made my chest tighten. Given the circumstances, continued placement here seems appropriate. Appropriate. Like this was where mothers belonged once they stopped being useful. That night, I sat in my chair by the window and watched the sun go down behind the parking lot. Cars came and went. People left. I stayed. I thought about my son's hands again. How steady they must be now. How many lives he'd saved. How proud the world was of him. And I wondered if he knew that every life he saved came at the cost of the one person who never let him fall. Because here's the thing. Nobody tells you about success. It doesn't have to be cruel. But it becomes cruel real fast when nobody reminds you who you used to be. And just when I thought my life would fade out quietly in that annex, something unexpected happened, something that finally forced my son to look straight at the silence he'd created. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing important ever happens on Tuesdays. That's what I used to think. Tuesdays are for routines, for pills in little paper cups, for bland lunches and afternoon naps you don't actually sleep through. That Tuesday started like all the others until the fire alarm went off. Not the real kind, not smoke and flames. Just the sharp, sudden scream of noise that makes old hearts jump and hands shake. The aides moved fast, practiced. Doors opened. Chairs rolled. Someone shouted numbers like we were luggage on a conveyor belt. I didn't panic. Panic takes energy. They wheeled us into the hall while they checked a sensor in the laundry room. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Long enough for strangers to end up sitting next to each other with nothing to do but exist. That's when the woman beside me leaned over. She had silver hair pulled tight, eyes sharp like she hadn't given up yet. She tapped my arm gently and held up a phone. "Is that you?" she asked, pointing to the screen. On it was a news article. Big headline. Clean photo. Top neurosurgeon leads breakthrough procedure. I recognized that face instantly. My son. My chest tightened so hard I had to grip the arms of my chair. I nodded. Her eyebrows lifted. "That's your boy?" I nodded again. Tears burned, but I held them back. I didn't want to cry in front of strangers anymore. I was tired of being that woman. She smiled, soft, proud. "He saved my nephew. 2 years ago, doctors said he wouldn't walk again." I swallowed. She squeezed my hand. "You raised a good man." That's when it broke. Not loud, not messy. Just quiet tears sliding down my face, soaking into the collar of a borrowed sweater. Good man. Good men don't let their mothers disappear. The alarm stopped. They rolled us back to our rooms. Life resumed like nothing had happened. But something had shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. The woman's words kept echoing in my head. You raised a good man. Had I? Or had I raised someone so focused on fixing brains that he forgot hearts exist? The next morning, a nurse came in holding a tablet. "You've got a visitor," she said. Visitor. That word hit different. The screen lit up. It was my son. Not a scheduled call. Not a 5-minute check-in. He looked off. No white coat. No office behind him. Just a plain wall and tired eyes. "Mom," he said quietly. "Where are you?" I stared at him. He didn't know. After all this time, he didn't know. I grabbed the tablet and typed with my good hand. Slow. Deliberate. Annex. Long-term care. Back building. His face changed. The color drained. His mouth opened, then closed. "What?" he whispered. "No, that can't be right." I typed again. "It is." He rubbed his face with both hands hard, like he was trying to wake himself up. "I thought, I was told you were somewhere else. Somewhere better." Better. That word again. I wanted to ask him who told him that. I wanted to ask why he never checked, why he trusted voices that weren't mine. But I didn't type any of that. Instead, I wrote, "I'm still here." He stared at the words for a long time. "I'm coming," he said finally. "I'm flying in. Today." My heart jumped and then immediately sank. I'd waited too long to trust promises. The call ended, and I sat there staring at the blank screen, afraid to hope, afraid not to. Because if he came now, if he finally saw me like this, there would be no pretending left. No smooth explanations, just the truth. And the truth has a way of cutting deeper than any scalpel. But what my son walked into when he arrived wasn't just a building or a room. It was the full weight of everything he'd signed away. And the moment he realized silence has consequences you can't undo. He arrived on a Friday. I know because Fridays always used to mean payday back, when my life was measured in hours worked and bodies tired. Funny how some habits stick, even when the reasons disappear. They told me he was here before I saw him. The nurse came in first. Her voice was softer than usual. "You've got family at the front desk." Family. I straightened in my chair, smoothed my shirt with my left hand like it mattered. Like I was meeting someone new instead of the boy I carried on my hip while scrubbing floors. When he walked in, he stopped short, just froze. Like his brain, brilliant, trained, confident, couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't the place he imagined. No sunlight pouring through big windows. No private room with fresh flowers. No quiet dignity. Just me. Smaller. Thinner. Sitting under a flickering light with a name spelled wrong on the door behind me. "Mom," he said. His voice cracked. I smiled. Because that's what mothers do when their children finally look at them. He crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt in front of me like he was afraid I'd disappear if he blinked. He took my hands, my rough hands, my shaking hands, and held them like they were something precious. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know." I believed him. That's the part people don't get. I never stopped believing in him. He started talking fast after that, apologizing, explaining, words spilling out like he was trying to stitch time back together. "They told me you were safe, comfortable, that you needed structure, that this was temporary." Temporary. That word again. He looked around the room, finally seeing it. The narrow bed, the bolted TV, the silence pressed into the walls. His hands tightened around mine. "Who did this?" he asked. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It had an edge I'd never heard before. I pointed to the chair. He pulled it close and sat, leaning forward like he was in an interrogation room. "Mom," he said, slower now. "Tell me everything." I took the pen and pad they kept on the table. My fingers cramped as I wrote. Each word cost effort, but I didn't rush. I'd waited long enough. Calls blocked. Letters returned. Papers signed. Decisions made without me. His breathing changed with every line. Shorter. Sharper. "I trusted them," he said, more to himself than to me. "I trusted my manager, my attorney. I thought they were handling things so I could focus on work." Work. The word landed heavy between us. "You were saving lives," he said. I thought I was doing the right thing." I touched his cheek with my left hand. He flinched like that broke him more than any accusation could have. I wrote one last sentence and pushed the pad toward him. I never needed managing. I needed my son. He covered his mouth with his hand and looked away. His shoulders shook. For the first time since he was little, my son cried in front of me. "I can fix this," he said after a moment. "I'll pull the files. Revoke everything. I'll move you. I'll stay. I promise." I watched his face. Older now. Lines at the eyes. Guilt sitting heavy on his shoulders. I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. But promises sound different when they come too late. Because here's the truth I couldn't say out loud. Some things don't break clean. They fracture. And no matter how skilled the surgeon, you don't always get full function back. I squeezed his hands once. Just once. And in his eyes, I saw it. The moment he realized success had finally cost him something he couldn't replace. But what neither of us understood, yet what no doctor can prepare you for, was that my silence was about to become permanent in a way apologies can't touch. They moved me out of the annex 2 days later. Fast. Funny how things move quick once the right person gets angry. My son pulled strings I didn't even know existed. Papers got reversed. Calls got returned. People who never learned my name suddenly smiled real wide and spoke real gentle. I was transferred to a nicer place. Bigger window. Real sunlight. A plant by the bed somebody remembered to water. They called it progress. My son called it fixing things. But here's what nobody tells you about damage. You don't undo it just because you change the room. He stayed with me that first night. Slept in a chair that was too small for him. Knees pulled up. Shoes still on. I watched him in the dark the way I used to when he was little, counting his breaths, making sure he was still here. He woke up early, just like his father used to. Sat up straight, rubbing his face like he was already late for something. "You need anything, Mom?" he asked. I shook my head. What I needed wasn't on any checklist. Speech therapy came every day. A sweet woman with endless patience. We worked on sounds, letters, short words. She celebrated every tiny win like it was a miracle. Ba, ma, pa. Funny thing, ma was the hardest. My son sat in on one session, watched me struggle, watched sweat bead on my forehead just trying to push air into shape. "Take your time," he said. "You don't have to rush." Rush. I almost laughed. I'd rushed my whole life so he wouldn't have to. Now time was the one thing we didn't have enough of. That afternoon he brought me documents. A stack of them. Revocations. Terminations. Apologies printed in legal font. "I fired them," he said. "All of them. Manager, attorney, anyone who touched this." I nodded. He waited. Like he needed me to say something. Forgive him. Praise him. I didn't. Instead, I picked up my pen and wrote, "Why didn't you come before?" He swallowed hard. Sat down, slow. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said. "They filtered everything. I thought you were resting. Recovering. Recovering. From what? Losing my voice? Losing my place? Losing him? You should have checked," he whispered. I should have checked. Yes, that was it. He should have checked. That night, I dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't my kitchen. It was a hospital hallway, bright, endless, white. My son was walking ahead of me, fast, calling my name. I tried to answer. Nothing came out. When I woke up, my chest felt tight. Not pain pressure. Like something was closing in. The nurse noticed my breathing change. Called a doctor. Machines beeped louder than usual. My son stood by the bed, fear all over his face. "What's happening?" he asked. They spoke in careful words. Too careful. Complications. Secondary damage. Limited recovery potential. I watched his face as he translated that into real meaning. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't getting better. That evening, he leaned close and said, "Mom, say anything. Please." I tried. God knows I tried. I focused on his face, on his eyes, on the boy he used to be. My mouth moved. No sound came out. He broke then. Not quiet tears, not controlled. He cried like a child who finally understands what he lost. And in that moment, I understood something too. Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's full of everything you didn't say in time. But the real twist, the one that finally shattered my son, came from something I'd prepared long before my stroke, back when I still had a voice. I didn't plan it because I was afraid. I planned it because I was a mother. Years before my stroke, back when my hands were steady and my voice still worked, I'd gone to a free legal clinic at the community center. Tuesdays, folding chairs, bad coffee, volunteers who looked like they still believed in justice. They asked why I was there. I said, I just want things clear. Clear meant simple. Clear meant honest. Clear meant my son wouldn't have to guess who I was or what I wanted if something happened to me. I wrote a letter that day. Not a will, not instructions. A letter. The kind you write when you're not angry yet. When love still feels loud enough to explain itself. I sealed it in an envelope and labeled it in my shaky handwriting. For my son, open only if I can't speak. I gave it to the clinic to hold. They promised, crossed their hearts, signed their names they'd deliver it if the time ever came. I forgot about it after that. Life does that. It keeps moving until it doesn't. The envelope showed up 3 weeks after my son moved me to the new place. A woman from the clinic walked in holding it like it weighed more than paper. She looked at me, then at my son, then back at me. You ready? She asked him. I nodded for him. He took the envelope slow. His hands, the same hands that saved strangers every day, were shaking. He sat down, opened it. I watched his face change with every line. I didn't need to hear the words. I remembered them. My sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I can't explain myself anymore. So let me say what matters while I still can. He covered his mouth halfway through. I don't blame you for growing. I raised you to fly. But if anyone ever tells you I am a burden, they are lying. If anyone ever tells you distance is love, they are lying. Tears rolled down his face, hitting the paper. I don't need your money. I don't need your success. I need your voice once in a while, reminding me I still exist to you. He broke when he reached the end. If I am ever quiet, please remember I was never silent by choice. The room went still. He folded the letter carefully, like it might tear if he rushed, and pressed it to his chest. I didn't protect you, he whispered. You protected me, even from myself. I reached for his hand. This time, when my fingers closed around his, he didn't pull away to explain or fix. He just stayed. Later that night, he played me recordings on his phone. Messages he'd saved over the years but never really listened to. My voice, laughing, asking if he ate, telling him to rest. He played them over and over, like he was afraid they'd disappear if he stopped. That's when he finally understood. The scariest thing about silence isn't losing sound. It's realizing too late whose voice you let fade. And just when we thought the hardest part was behind us, my body made one last decision, one my son could not reverse, no matter how hard he tried. The doctor didn't come in with urgency. That's how I knew. No rushed footsteps, no sharp orders, just a soft knock and a face already prepared for grief. My son stood when he saw her, instinct kicking in before emotion. He was back in his element for half a second, professional, alert, ready to fight. She didn't give him anything to fight. It's progressing, she said gently. The damage is spreading. My son asked questions. Technical ones. The kind he's trained to ask. Blood flow, oxygen, intervention options. She answered all of them, and still shook her head. I watched him translate her words into truth the same way I'd watched him do with patients' families on TV interviews. This time, he was on the wrong side of the explanation. She understands, the doctor added, looking at me. More than she can show. I wanted to tell her I understood perfectly, that my body was done negotiating, that it had carried enough. The room emptied out quietly after that. Machines hummed. A monitor blinked like a tired eye refusing to close. My son sat beside me, closer than he had in years. He held my hand like he was afraid it might vanish if he loosened his grip. I should have been here sooner, he said. I should have listened. I looked at him. Really looked. Not the surgeon. Not the success story. Just my boy. I lifted my left hand, the one that still obeyed me, and tapped his fingers once. No blame. That's the thing about real love. It doesn't keep score. He leaned down until his forehead touched mine. I felt his breath shake. I'm here now, he whispered. I won't leave. I wished I could tell him that staying isn't always about time. Sometimes it's about timing. They let him play the recordings again. My old voicemails. My laughter from years ago. My voice reminding him to eat, to sleep, to live. He cried listening to them. I watched him cry, and I felt peaceful. That surprised me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was tired in a good way. Like after a long day where you know you did everything you could. The nurse asked if I wanted anything. I nodded. She leaned in. I used every ounce of strength I had left. Every memory. Every muscle that still remembered who I was. My lips moved. A sound came out. Just one. Barely there. But real. My son froze. Mom? He whispered. I did it again. Bah. It wasn't his full name. But it was enough. He broke down completely then, gripping my hand, pressing it to his face like he could anchor me there. I hear you, he sobbed. I hear you. Yes, you do. That was all I ever wanted. The lights dimmed sometime after that. The sounds softened. The world felt lighter, like it was finally letting me go. And as my breathing slowed, I realized something important. Silence didn't win. Love did. But the story doesn't end where you think it does. I don't know how long after that moment I stayed. Time feels different when your body stops arguing with the world. But I know this. I didn't leave angry. I left knowing my son finally heard me. After I was gone, they told him there was nothing more to do. Doctors always say that when they mean this one isn't yours to save. My son stayed anyway. Sat in that chair long after the machines went quiet. Held my hand even when it was just a hand. They said he didn't move for hours. I know, because he told me later. Yes, told me. Because some bonds don't end just because breathing does. He played my old voicemails at the memorial. Not the fancy kind either. No speeches from important people. No medical awards on display. Just my voice laughing, reminding him to eat, telling him to rest, saying I love you like it was the most normal thing in the world. People cried, not because I was special, but because they recognized the sound. Every mother sounds like that when she loves right. After that, my son changed things. Not loud, not for praise. He fired the systems that filtered families out. Tore down policies that treated voices like interruptions. He started calling patients mothers himself, sitting with them, listening even when it slowed him down, especially when it slowed him down. He put a rule on the wall of his department. Not framed, just printed paper. No one is ever too busy for the people who love them. Some doctors laughed at first. They stopped laughing when they saw him live by it. He visits places like the Annex now, sits with people whose names are spelled wrong on doors, holds hands that shake, listens to voices society already muted. Sometimes he brings flowers. Sometimes he brings time. He never blocks numbers anymore. And every Sunday, every single one, he leaves his phone on the table and listens to the silence. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds him what it cost. If I could say one last thing, if sound could shape itself just once more, I'd say this. Mothers don't need perfection. We don't need success. We don't need apologies that come too late. We need to be heard while our voices still work. So if you're listening to this and thinking of someone you love, call them. Not tomorrow. Not when life slows down. Now. Because silence doesn't always wait for permission. And love, real love, deserves a voice. This is where my story ends.